Nora's Tale. Written, illustrated, and narrated by Perpetual333. Chapter 2. Meeting Nora. Little over a week had passed since Nora came home with Dante. He'd taken her to the vet and had her shots done along with blood work to make sure she had a clean bill of health. And to his relief, she was marked down as being a healthy Fluffy, if not a little underfed due to her beginnings. Now she is moving around on her own, eyes wide and able to use the litter box and sleep in her own bed, at least until she gets older and better bowel control.
"Wow, Daddy,"
she pronounced as she played with her new ball. She'd only learned a few words and phrases so far, those being
"Daddy, love, want hug, milkies, bad poopy,
and
good poopy."
Against the suggestions of coworkers and a few others, Dante steered clear of the sorry stick and other forms of harsh punishment, making an altered sorry box that Nora was able to see out of all the sides and move around comfortably within. While there were some blankets, there were no toys or food. He used it as her timeout box when she was really naughty, which was fairly rare. When she did her bad poopies, she got a boop on the nose and had to help clean up the spot with her front hooves and a wet rag alongside her daddy. All in all, things were going well as far as Dante was concerned. Nora spoke softly, but with excitement, and intended to do her best to make good poopies. If she had an accident, at no fault of her own, she would not get punished, but reminded to pay more attention to what her body is saying while she was playing. It had been a few days since Dante had to sleep on the floor next to her, and he could even turn off most of the lights at night now. For such a little new thing, Nora was growing quickly, and she was learning quickly as well. And he was determined, when she could form full sentences, that he would continue to teach her manners as well as branch off to numbers and letters. Not many people had a well-mannered and well-learned Fluffy after all. "Do you remember what you say when someone gives you something?" Dante asked, crouched down smiling at her.
"Sorry?"
She answered questioningly, with her head cocked to the side. "No, silly," he replied, ruffling her mane gently and causing her to giggle. "You say thank you."
Thank you, Daddy."
Struggling to get the words out correctly, but managing in the end. "Good job," lifting her up slowly and gently, as not to surprise her and giving her a gentle hug. "You are very welcome, my little love," setting her down to a trill of giggle snorts. Patting her on the head, he announced, "Daddy needs to go clean the kitchen and feed another little beast before it throws a fit. If you're a good Fluffy and don't cry or make a mess while I'm gone." He stopped and looked around, making sure that nothing breakable was within reach and all the electrical wires were tucked away from small hooves and outlets were still covered. "Daddy will give you a special treat." Bouncing up and down, nodding her agreement, she waved her little hoof at him as he opened the door and stepped over the box he'd placed there to keep her in the room, forgetting to close the door behind him. In no time, she was stacking her blocks and rolling her ball into them, laughing as they toppled over, not even realizing anymore that she was not completely alone in the room. Though the noise of dishes being moved around and running water was apparent in the background, she was oblivious to it all, stacking blocks and toppling them over, again and again, endlessly entertained by her simple game. After a bit, though, she did notice the sounds of water, and vaguely remembered that Daddy was cleaning something and would be back. Time seems to have dragged on for a long forever, as the fun of her game began to disappear, and she started to feel sad and scared. From the other side of the tall wall Dada kept in the doorway, she heard the odd sound she had never heard before. It sounded like a low rumble or growl. Unsure of what to do, she started backing away from the doorway and towards her bed, never taking her eyes away from the direction of the noise. Once she reached her bed, she quickly jumped in it and covered herself with her blankie. With her head covered, she heard another sound accompanying the first. It was the sound of something scratching at the wall now. Gently at first, and then more quickly, just before she heard a thump, followed by the sound of the growl getting closer and closer. She let out a small squeak and whispered,
"Oh no! Monster!"
shaking more and trying her best not to mess her bed and make her daddy sad. A small vibrating lump was hidden in the blankets and squeaking in fear as the monster got closer and first sniffed and then lightly pawed at the moving lump. In the moment it took the paw to connect Nora, she cried out and lost control of her bodily functions, peeing and pooping as she ran to try and hide under Daddy's bed. All she saw as she ran was a black street heading out of the door that no longer had the wall protecting her from the outside world. Still shivering and lightly crying under the bed is where Dante found Nora when he returned, with her hiding behind the leg of the bed with a trail of bodily fluids leading from her bed to her current location. "Sweetie," he said, bending down and gently picking her up. "What happened, Nora? What's wrong, little one?" Stuttering and shaking, she looked up at his face with tears in her eyes and said,
Monster! Daddy, help! Eating me, bad puppies and scared off monster!
Curious and confused, Dante looked around. Not seeing anything, he asked, "Where is the monster, baby?" Pointing with her little hoof at the doorway, he saw a semi-glowing pair of yellow-green eyes and quickly understood what had happened. Shaking his head, he sat down and rocked her gently. "Oh, love, that wasn't a monster. That was my cat, Nero. I was waiting to introduce you to him until you got a little bit bigger." Calming down a bit and tears starting to dry up, she looked up at her daddy.
Cat?
She said, cocking her head from side to side, trying to figure out the word's meaning. Making kissing noises and rubbing his fingers together, Dante coaxed the cat out of the dark hall and into the light. It didn't move too far in, but it was enough that Nora could see it clearly. "See, that is a cat. His name is Nero. The people who owned his mommy and siblings didn't want him, so I took him in."
Like me?
She asked, looking at the sleek, short-haired black cat, and then to her daddy with questioning eyes. Surprised that she remembered her own life before coming home with him, Dante nodded and replied with a bit of shock in his voice. Yes? Nora, like you, I've had him for about a year and a half now. Kind of a lazy little thing, and though he is mostly good about not clawing furniture, I keep his claws trimmed down constantly, even more so now that you're here." Noticing that the small creature was no longer making an awful ruckus or producing that terrible smell, Nero sauntered over as if nothing had happened and rubbed his head on Nora in Dante's hand before licking her and purring softly. This caused Nora to smile and giggle. She patted the cat on the head and hugged its face as it continued to lick her.
Like cat, Daddy. You're a good cat.
Nora said, still hugging Nero. Dante chuckled. "I am glad, little one. Now let's get all this mess cleaned up, and before you ask, no, you're not in trouble, Nora. But I would not mind the help cleaning up your bed and floor before you get a bath." Nodding, Nora proceeded to help him clean up to the best of her abilities. The whole time, Nero would purr and rub up against her, licking her from time to time, causing her to giggle. After the mess was cleaned up and she was no longer filthy, Dante, with Nora in his arms and Nero on his lap, they watched some fluffy baby TV while Nora chewed on her small gummy treat, and Nero enjoyed his own little crunchy snack before they all fell asleep on the couch.